Well, welcome everyone to today's session. We're going to be covering ingest and manage data in Fabric with Data Factory and notebooks on your journey to getting certified on the DP-700 Fabric Data Engineer certification. I'm going to hand this first over to my co-presenter, Sue, to give you a quick introduction.
Hi, thanks, Josh. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this series. Absolutely delighted to be here. My name is Sue Bays. I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP. My details are there. Please feel free to reach out. And I run Devon and Cornwall Power BI Meetup Group. Thanks, Josh.
And I'm Joshua Higginbotham. I'm also a Microsoft Data Platform MVP. Like Sue mentioned, there's my details below. Please feel free to connect on LinkedIn with Sue and I. Happy to help after this event. I also run a group in Louisville, Kentucky called the Louisville Data Technology Group. If you are interested in ever speaking or attending. Perfect. I want to thank our moderators who are actively in chat, answering your questions. Make sure to say hi to both of them, and thank you for helping to support this event as well. So hopefully you've seen this calendar session list before, but there are sessions throughout the next couple weeks around getting certified in the DP-700. Obviously, you're here for the ingest and manage data in Fabric with Data Factory and notebooks, but our next event is on the 11th for implement real-time intelligence in Microsoft Fabric, so mark your calendars for that. You may have heard of the big event, the Fabric Community Conference, which is in Vegas this year. If you are not registered and you would like to attend, you can use MSCUST as a discount code to get off $150 in your registration. Myself, Christian, and I think Deepthi will all be there. So if you are attending, make sure to reach out and would love to say hi. If you've not taken the exam before, or you're looking for just a way to discount it, you can sign up for a 50% discount on the DP-700 following this link, aka.msgcdp700. You fill out the form, and then a discount code will be sent, but that is only until March 31st and while supplies last. This session is live and interactive. We want it to be more of a conversation than just Sue and I reading from slides. So please ask questions. We'll do our best to answer them during this time. But if not, please reach out like we talked about before. Cool. So what are we going to cover in this episode? Ingest and manage data in Fabric with Data Factory and notebooks. Some of this is going to be maybe new to you. Some of it's going to be existing because you've worked in some of the other components that make up Fabric. But we're going to go over the DP-700 really quickly. Then we're going to jump into what is Microsoft Fabric as a platform. That way we have a good understanding of what it is before we dive deeper into data ingestion, data integration, and then we're going to go a little bit deeper around pipelines and notebooks and how we integrate our data and how do we ingest data into this platform. So for the next piece, I'm going to hand this over to Sue so she can kind of cover what the DP-700 is.
Hi. So DP-700, for those of you that are interested, it basically covers the three areas in Microsoft Fabric: ingesting and transforming data, securing a solution and managing it, and monitoring and optimizing an analytics solution. I set mine on Monday. It's hard, but doable. And we're here to give you as much help as we can in your journey along this pathway. So what will you be tested on? Once you move and you start looking and taking your DP-700, you're going to be looking at the various areas there. They're split a third each way, which is appropriate: implementing and managing a solution, ingesting and transforming data, and then monitoring and optimizing an analytics solution. And I will stress it's important that you get some practical hands-on experience with SQL, with KQL, and just really understanding the different languages that we use within data engineering, it's useful to get that practical knowledge and experience as well. So when we move on from our DP-700, you'll see that the DP-700 is basically here to but to replace the DP-T03, which is being deprecated very soon. So Microsoft are focusing on the Fabric environment as the one-stop shop for all of your data ingestion, and this will be the main certification for a data engineer within the Microsoft ecosystem. Is optimized for professionals, and I hope that you'll enjoy learning about it, as I know I have, and Josh and I are a huge fan of notebooks, so lots of that to come. So I'm going to pass over to Josh just to give you that little brief understanding of Fabric.
Thank you, Sue. So now that we've kind of covered what is involved in the DP-700, we want to first start off and just give you an introduction of what Microsoft Fabric is, just in case this is maybe your first time interacting with it, or you're just trying to get some additional clarity around what are the components of Fabric and what is the architecture. So you'll see here where we have these cards that kind of represent the different workloads that you're going to be interacting with within Fabric. We have things like Data Factory, which is your data integration tool where you can leverage Gen2 Dataflows or Dataflows Gen2 to be able to integrate your data in through Power Query. You also have other ways to be able to bring data in, whether it's copy data activity and other task types. If you've come from Azure Data Factory, this interface is going to look just like you would in Azure Data Factory. It's just optimized and built around the Fabric environment. We then go into data engineering, where this is you're implementing and leveraging notebooks for solutions around Spark. Sue and I are huge fans of this area. We love Python and we love notebooks, and so we'll do our best to not just nerd out on that the whole time. But you know, it's a great addition to your data team when you lean into it. We then have data warehousing, which leverages industry leading SQL performance, the things that we have worked with and loved for years within the Azure space, that is now that has just been brought into the Fabric environment to make working in that data warehouse a little bit more easy. We then have data science workloads. If you are a data scientist or you have team members that are interacting with that type of a workload, this is a great addition to your team. I've historically been a data engineering supporting data science teams that have worked in other systems. There was always a barrier to be able to interact with each other because I was doing all of my engineering in one side and they were doing all of their science work in other systems. And by bringing those two different personas together, we're able to interact and work better together and produce better products. We then have real-time intelligence, which again brings some of the technologies that we may have seen in Azure, things like streaming analytics, Azure Data Explorer, and brings it into the fold of Fabric and allows us to build solutions to stream real-time data into our systems to be able to monitor and act on that as it comes in rather than alerting on some batch. And then we have Power BI, which we all know and love. All of this is built on the OneLake, which is your unified data storage for Fabric, which makes this just a lot easier to interact with this stuff. Fabric is a SaaS-based platform, so you'll find if you haven't worked in Fabric recently that most of this is a button click and you can generate these artifacts or items. So what is data engineering Fabric? First off, you're going to build a lakehouse. This is where you can store all of your organizational data, whether it's non-structured, semi-structured, or structured data. You're going to then use notebooks to interact with that data through Spark. There's various languages that are supported in that, and we'll cover that in a different slide. There's a couple different ways that you can author your solutions, both in the cloud version in the Fabric portal, but you can also download the VS Code extension for Fabric and be able to develop in notebooks locally on your machine, and then just tie that workload to the compute up in the cloud. So for the next session on understanding data ingestion, I'm going to hand it over to Sue to kind of go into depth with this stuff.
Brilliant. Thanks, Josh. So no solution is of any use unless we have data. And we can get data from so many different places now at different levels of complexity. We can have batch data, real-time data, low-code data, CSV files, and all of the things that we find is that we need all of this data to enable us to actually build and answer questions that our businesses want answered. And it doesn't come from one source or one area. It's usually dirty. And it needs to be combined and placed in such a way that whether you're a data scientist and you want the raw data, or if you're a business user and you want your model from the gold layer where it's perfectly cleansed and ready, it all needs to be ingested from wherever it comes in. And by using Fabric, you can store it all in one place. And that means that it's easy to combine and to get the data working together. So what are the different ways that we can actually pull data in? Dataflows Gen2, that's really low code. It's fabulous. You can use it in Excel. It's basically Power Query. It's the back end of Excel. It's the back end of Power BI. It's a drag and drop interface. You can click on any button and you can set up an absolutely perfect data ingestion using something that's very low code. And then as you develop and you become better, then you can go into the advanced editor. So it's a nice move from a business analyst that's using Excel or Power BI into a data flow. And most people within Power BI will be used to using data flows. But where Dataflows Gen2 are an improvement from the normal data flows in the service are that the data is actually stored in data lakes that are hosted within a lakehouse, delta tables that are hosted within a lakehouse. And you can also, when you click on the data flow, you can decide where you want to export the data flow to. Normal data flows or in Power Query and Excel, you can only access the data from within Excel or Power BI. But a Dataflow Gen2, because the data is stored in the Delta table, in the lakehouse, then it opens up a whole raft of opportunities from where that data can be stored. It makes it incredibly easy to code and to get data ingested into your system. We also then start looking at pipelines, data factory pipelines. Now, pipelines are brilliant, and we're going to go into much more depth with pipelines later on in this session. But pipelines basically allow you to have a pipeline of data. They do what they say, basically. So you can actually drag and drop different methods of ingesting data and set up a whole flow of information and how you want it to run, whether by pressing run or for having a schedule to run or using a notebook, which takes me very nicely into notebooks. And if there's one thing you will know by the end of this hour is that Josh and I are huge Python geeks and we love our notebooks. So notebooks, the fabulous thing about notebooks is that it means that you can use Python and PySpark within the Fabric environment. You don't have to set up an instance of Python on your machine. You don't have to worry about which environment you're pulling from. It all sits within the Fabric environment, and you can just drag and drop your data in, and the actual code is written for you. So it's very easy for you to start using notebooks to manage your data. There's also a little tool called Data Wrangler, which again is a bit like the Power Query element, and it helps you with your code to understand how to do some of the basic data cleansing tools. We've got shortcuts which enable you to take a shortcut of your data, and I'm going to pass over to Josh in a minute to go into a little bit more depth with shortcuts and mirroring, because he uses this as part of his everyday. So basically, a shortcut enables you to have no data duplication at all, and it allows you to ingest the data into your OneLake using storage efficiency. Mirroring takes a mirror of your data Event streams are brilliant. They allow you to pull in real-time data using KQL, and then direct uploads, actually where you can just drag and drop your uploads into your lakehouse and they sit there. But I'm going to let Josh talk to you a little bit more about shortcuts and mirroring, because he uses this daily within his day-to-day role.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah. So, as you've heard here, there's countless ways to bring in data within the Fabric environment. Shortcuts and mirroring are a way to ease some of the burden of I've already got data in existing areas, whether it's in ADLS, S3, Google Cloud Storage, another location in your OneLake. And it aims to allow you to be able to bring that data in. So it's going to reside where it currently is, but then just give you access to it in a lakehouse, in a warehouse, to be able to then query that and pull that data. So you're not having to incur the same ETL cost over and over and over again to just move that over. And it lessens the burden to migrate to Fabric initially. So if you already have your data sitting in ADLS, then all you have to do is shortcut it to bring it into Fabric to then do whatever modeling and transformations you want against it. And then with mirroring, there are a handful of sources that mirroring supports today. We'll talk a little bit about like Azure SQL Database is one of those. Within button clicks, I can set up mirroring from Azure SQL Database into my Fabric environment with a very central monitoring window to be able to monitor for these events to make sure this data is mirroring over into the OneLake. So then I have access to it, eliminating the burden of ETLing that data over initially. Go out to the MS Docs page to see more about mirroring and the supported systems, as well as just some of the limitations that are currently listed for it. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Josh. So once we've talked about the different ways that you can ingest data, you want to think about which one you're going to choose. We've described a whole raft of ways that you can pull data into your Fabric environment, but you then also want to start thinking about what method you will use for what type of data. And this is where you need to speak to your customers to get requirements, to understand what they're looking for and what actually data you're going to have. So you would want to think about the volume of data. So if you've got something that has got a really high throughput, then you might choose a data pipeline or a copy procedure. Whereas if it's something that is low to medium volume, then something like a data flow and shortcuts may be more appropriate. So it's important to understand the volume. Together with volume, you really do need to understand the type of data that is being pulled into your environment. So if it's something that's actually structured, a pipeline would be useful, a data flow would be useful, or a copy. But not all of our data is unstructured. Sometimes data can be unstructured or semi-structured, in which case notebooks are absolutely brilliant, or a lakehouse ingestion allows you to pull in that data without needing it to be in such a structured format as you would require for a database or a data warehouse. Then you want to think about how often are you going to pull this data in? Is it something that you need immediately? Is it something that needs to be refreshed instantly? In which case you would be looking at your real-time intelligence. And with that, you've got the event streams and the event house, and there's a real-time hub where all of the real-time intelligence can sit, which is really quite straightforward to get set up and to use. But if it's something that is a batch processing, then again, pipelines would be quite useful, or copy. So think about how often you need your data to come through. And then if you look at Josh and I haven't used mirroring, but Josh has. I use a lot of data flows, Josh hasn't. So within your skill set and your environment, you'll find that different personas have different skills and different skill sets. And it's the way that Fabric is set up is to try and allow skills not to be a barrier to your business moving forward, to enable the right person with the skills that they have to use the tools that they need to get the jobs done for the team. And I think that's really useful as well. Then you might want to think about, okay, what are the integration needs? I've got data coming in from CSVs, I've got data coming in from warehouses, I've got some unstructured data set. What needs to be integrated with what to produce a solution? Also then thinking about the security as to who has access to which area, which is really interesting, and it's quite straightforward to set up. Then you might want to think about your performance requirements, whether it's going to be a high performance, you want event streams for low latency and a high throughput. But again, if it's something that is fairly moderate, then a pipeline or a data flow might be great for general purpose. And then, of course, once the data comes in, what do we need to do with it? How complex is it? Is it a straightforward streaming data event stream where we don't really need to do very much? Or is it something that's coming in from an Excel file, which is horrible? So thinking about the complexity of the data transformations that you need to do will also help you think about what type of process that you want to do. Notebooks are very good here as well. So as you can see, there's lots of different things to think about with your ingestion capabilities and your method. But what we're going to do now is I'm going to pass over to Josh, who's going to talk through some of the ways that you can integrate data sources within Fabric.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, so now that you've got the data into Fabric, what are you going to do with it? How do I integrate that into my existing data stores, which is where some of the complexity is going to come from. So we're going to talk about some of those options. We've already mentioned this before, some of these workloads, so we'll go a little bit deeper as we get into the slides. But the same tools that you're going to ingest your data in are going to be the same tools that you're going to integrate your data into these existing lake houses, event houses, and Fabric warehouses. But we have a couple different workloads that we can use, and as we talked about previously, that's one of the beautiful things about Fabric is depending on your team and their skill sets, there are different levels that you can go with. I can go with a low code, no code way of integrating my data using Dataflows Gen2 data pipelines, event streams, or if I have more advanced engineers that know PySpark or Spark SQL, then they can leverage notebooks to do this integration. And so with Dataflow Gen2, we can enable that kind of low-code interface to be able to bring this in, do some level of transformation, and then write it to it. But then if we start to see that we have large volumes of data and highly complex transformations, we're going to want to look at something like a notebook and leverage that Spark engine to be able to do that and distribute that work across all of the worker threads that are present. We'll talk a little bit about real-time intelligence a little bit later on within some slides that will add some additional clarity, I believe. But like Sue mentioned, with me having experience in shortcuts and mirroring, I don't use Dataflow Gen2s that often, so I want to hand this over to Sue to kind of talk about that in a little bit more detail.
Okay, thanks, Josh. So Dataflows Gen2 is, as it says on the slide, it's a really low-code environment that allows you to drag and drop, and it basically helps you to write the code that you want to write. But don't underestimate the fact that you can drag and drop with the power of what you can do with the Power Query engine, the M engine. You can do some really advanced transformations using the advanced editor, and it's a brilliant way to upskill your staff to start thinking about how data works, how it operates, what you need to have to happen to your data to make sure that it's cleansed and it's in the correct format that we can use from model. You can pull in data from many, many different sources. You can transform it. You can set up your queries to run. And then the great thing about Dataflow Gen2 is you choose where you want to load it to. So it's actually opening up a huge amount of functionality to code that you can then write, that can be reused, that you can train your staff to use, to stop data having to be continually changed, so that we're changing it, we're making sure that it's easy to use, it's in the right model and the right process and the right format that we require. And then once you've set it up to be exported, you can then run your data flow as an activity within a pipeline. And then it's automated. There's less chance of error, and it makes it much simpler. And it's also a lot quicker. Dataflows Gen2 is much quicker than Dataflows Gen1 because we're using the Delta tables within our lake houses. But I'm going to pass over to Josh now, who's going to go through how we can use a pipeline and how we can run our data flows and other processes within pipelines.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, so data pipelines are probably not something new to data engineers that are watching this stream. Whether you've worked in SSIS, Azure Data Factory, another kind of low-code ETL solution, you're able to drag and drop these activity types down into your developer pane and then link those together to control the flow of how that pipeline is going to run. There are different activity types, and we're not going to go through all those on this call or on this stream, but definitely go into the interface, look through those. We'll talk a little bit, and we got some videos later that will show you how to build one of these out. But just for this slide, we have a copy data activity that is going to move data from a source location into a destination. We can then validate for a certain condition, run a script, whatever it may be, and then finally call a notebook to go do something, whether it's another transformation, it could be calling an API to trigger an event, whatever it may be. And you'll see a little bit later where we have a data pipeline that the final step is to alert a certain team on completion of this event. And I believe we have a question that has been passed, so I'll hand this over to Sue.
Thanks, Josh. I didn't see the question. Sorry, I was too busy waxing lyrically about data flows. So the question is there a way to see the SQL from a data flow? Yes, you can do, as long as it gets quite complex, but as long as the SQL, the Power Query M code that you write is able to query fold, which means it's able to pass the SQL back to the source of data that it's pulling it from. And there's you can right click on the step within the Power Query and you can click View Native Query, and it will show you, as long as the query is the source is able to manage query folding, it will show you the SQL query. Please be aware that your database administrator might not quite like your SQL query because sometimes it's not exactly optimized. So, but what it does do is it does teach you that, if you're pulling from SQL using a Power Query, that, you do the basic things. You select your data, then you select your columns and you select your rows so that you're only bringing in the data that you require into your model, which would be the same with SQL, where you're selecting the columns, you're selecting the rows, you're filtering. So those basic steps to actually transform your data, your database administrator isn't going to be too cross with you. But if you start doing lots of complex query folding steps, then you might find that they're not quite so happy. Thank you.
All right, and now on to our favorite thing, or Sue and I's favorite thing, Fabric notebooks. So hopefully you've interacted with notebooks. Notebook support has been around in Azure Data Studio and Visual Studio Code for a while now. But to just kind of cover what Fabric notebooks really are, notebooks are a way of running code cell by cell, or you can run from top down, but also inject markdown cells at the top or throughout to be able to easily document what this code is doing, what this notebook is doing. A lot of teams will embed their documentation about processes here, whether it's links out to helpful documentation, whatever it may be, just kind of ease that burden of onboarding new team members. But Notebooks support multiple languages, so we have things like Spark SQL, Scala, Python, again, one of our favorites, R, and then HTML. You can switch the default mode of the notebook to a set language, and then you can also switch a set cell to that language. And you'll see in a lot of productions implementations of notebooks where people are going to change languages throughout. They may bring in data through PySpark because they need to query an API to be able to bring that data in. But then once it is loaded into a Delta table, they may interact with that data, do some level of transformation using Spark SQL. And this kind of goes back to that persona and skill set that C was talking about early around you don't have to become an expert in PySpark to be able to use these technologies or notebooks in general. You can learn enough to be able to get through some of the first initial steps, or you build functions for code reuse, and then you leverage the language that you're strong in to be able to do some of these workloads. But we can integrate notebooks with other workloads within Fabric. So as we kind of saw earlier, we had a data pipeline that first started off with that copy data activity, but then later on we call it a notebook, and you could follow that up with another activity type that is not a notebook. So it does integrate within your processing end to end. You can schedule notebooks and automate just like you would within a pipeline. So it is running on some schedule. You can run these notebooks interactively, but they're also not just for data engineering purposes. We can leverage notebooks for data exploration. Say you're a data engineer and you're being tasked with bringing in data for the first time. We always want to first interrogate that data, look at it, profile it, understand it, so we can then know what type of transformation we need to do, what data cleansing activities that we want to do, and then we can visualize that data. So there are libraries out there like Matplotlib, Plotly that allow us to create visualizations in the notebook. And that may be beneficial in when you start to do QA and SBC checks within your data engineering pipelines. So as you build these, you're outputting the result sets to the screen. So that way I can go look at this after a run to verify, hey, somebody reported an issue. Where did it happen within my workload, within my pipeline? And because I'm outputting the rows from the data frame, or I'm doing a distinct count on a graph, I can see I'm expecting 50 rows. I got 25. There must be something wrong here. Notebooks can also be leveraged in your ML and AI workloads. There are libraries like what we were talking about with the visualization layer for your ML and AI workloads. And there's some really cool tutorials and examples on calling things like Azure OpenAI Service within Fabric to be able to leverage the LLMs to, get some additional data or detail around something. All of this integrates within the Spark environment. There's a ton of resources out there on learning how to properly write code within PySpark, how to ensure that you're writing things that are performant, that will distribute across all those worker threads. And then there is the monitoring hub in Fabric where we can go and look at these runs of these notebooks or these data pipelines to be able to see, do we have a performance bottleneck? And then dig deeper using the Spark UI to be able to see, what is occurring here. So that's great, and that's all about batch data. But then we have the need for real-time data. So there may be a scenario where I need to be able to bring this data in real time, monitor for it, and alert off of it. And what Fabric Real-Time Intelligence does is it allows us within button clicks to be able to build out a solution that will allow us to stream data in. So we start off with an event stream, and all that really is a way to be able to connect the various sources. We also have the ability to create a custom source where I can create this custom source and give out the credentials, if you will, to our application so it can then push a payload to the stream. And an event stream looks a lot like a data pipeline. You have items that you can drag and drop down. So we have our source, but then we can do some level of transformation against this data. We can filter the data, we can aggregate, we can group by, and then we can load it into a destination. those destinations being a KQL database that lives in an event house. It can go into a lake house data warehouse. To be able to not only alert on the data as it is today, as it's coming in, but also maybe sending it to a lakehouse for long-term analytics and trending. Within that KQL database, you're going to have to leverage KQL to be able to interact with that. And if you've never worked in KQL, it may seem like this monumental effort to learn another language and you're dreading that, but really the syntax is fairly easy, and there's a ton of resources out there on it. And then there are ways to translate SQL into KQL. So you can go into a KQL query set, which is a kind of a script pane to be able to run your KQL. I can write explain and then give the SQL statement that I'm wanting to run, and it will translate that into KQL, so that way I can grab that and run it. Then from there, we can import those KQL queries into a real-time dashboard. We add that to a tile to then monitor for an event. I'm looking for profit percentage being above a certain limit. If that ever drops, then I need to go do something with that, and that's where we'll leverage Data Activator to act on that. Data Activator supports a couple different mechanisms to trigger off of. So say we are monitoring for profit margin being above a certain percentage, and if it drops below that, then I need to alert the sales team because something has happened. Or say I'm monitoring for data quality within my pipeline, and something falls out. So I'm doing an SBC check, and something is showing that we're having a fallout in our data. Then I can have Data Activator trigger an event that then calls another notebook to then go do something about that. And so it enhances our ability to act on this. We're no longer having to monitor for this, on some schedule, or have a person standing by to be able to go out and do this. We can act on it immediately. So with that, I'm going to hand this back over to Sue to cover integrating data using Data Factory a little bit more in depth.
Brilliant. Thanks, Josh. And the great thing about the Real-Time Intelligence Hub is if you use the Microsoft Learn environment, they set up so many examples that you can actually practice and get some real hands experience on, which is great. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look in more depth on data orchestration and integration using pipelines, because we've mentioned pipelines quite a lot during this session. And so we're going to show you a few examples of some data pipelines. We're going to show you how to do a copy job activity, and then also talk about how you run and monitor pipelines. So what you can see on the screen now is basically a data pipeline, and you can see it's a really familiar, nice authoring experience. So within this actual slide, what we're showing you is how you can actually set up a copy by new files only by the modified date template. So you open up the pipeline, you choose the template, you choose the template that you want, and then what it asks you for is basically your source data, where do you want to copy it from, and then your destination data. So it's giving you that opportunity as a template how to copy data from one place to another, making it nice and easy for you. In our next slide, then what we're going to look in more depth at is a copy job, where we're going to set up an easily ingested copy job. And please bear with Josh, because I've done little bookmarks on it, so to try and explain it. So what we're doing here is we're running through the notebook, but I'll go into more detail, and we're showing you how you can copy from an Oracle database through to a SQL Server database, how you can set it up. So if we go here at this next first bookmark, it's showing you actually how you can choose. So on this place, you're choosing where you want to copy your data from. And then what you do for the next bit, it'll show you actually where do you want to copy it to. So you've got a huge depth of destinations that you can choose, and it supports both batch and near real-time incremental copy. Once you've chosen your destination, then you're able to choose, do you want to copy it or do you want to have an incremental copy? So a one-off copy job or an incremental copy. And you have columns there that you can decide which column you want to use to drive the incremental copy, again, by clicking and connecting on the column. Once you've set up where you want to copy your data from, you get a really nice summary, which will show you where you're copying it from, where you're copying it to, and what are the sources of information that you're copying from, so that you can be confident that you've actually copied your data across. And then once you get to the next step, and you can see it takes you through each step, it shows you the data that's been copied from one place to the other within the actual pipeline. And you can see at the top, you've got the ability to run it or to schedule it, and you can monitor and go into more details. So it makes it really nice and easy for you to set up and run these different copy jobs by using a drag and drop experience. Our last and final example of a pipeline is showing how we can create a data flow. So we have a copy data product that we've pulled in, which is doing a copy job. Then we're using a data flow. And within that data flow, the data flow is pulling all of the different dimensions from the copy data. And then once it's finished, we're actually sending a completion email to whoever we decide we want to send the completion email to. Again, a really nice, solid ability just to drag and drop and set these pipelines up so that you can use them. And once you've set up your pipelines, then we can look at how to validate. And you can see here, you can check once the pipelines are set up, it will actually run through and it'll check that everything is working. And it'll show you which places, if you've got an error, where you've errored, which particular part of the pipeline that you've errored at, and it'll help you understand what the areas are. You can run, so when you're building your pipeline, you can just do a one-off run if you want to check and see that it's working. But equally, you can schedule your pipeline to work at different occasions, depending upon what your scheduling needs are. You can also view the run history. So if something breaks and you want to understand more about it, you can go back and you can actually look at the run history to see when it broke and what the issues are that caused it to run. And you can view the pipeline run history as to see the details of an individual run, but you can also see the individual execution time for each activity as a Gantt chart. So it enables you to actually get much more of an understanding of what's happening with your data and your pipelines as you work through the different process. So over to Josh for our favorite notebooks.
Thank you, Sue. So again, we've talked about this, and I'm just going to remind everybody, just in case you're fearful about jumping in on Fabric, but there are countless ways that you can interact with your data and do similar workloads within Fabric. And so we talked a little bit in depth about Gen2 data flows or Dataflows Gen2 data pipelines, and we're going to go a little bit more in depth in notebooks. So you're going to use notebooks to ingest and transform data. So we've talked a little bit about leveraging copy data activity to be able to bring data in from a source and destination, but you don't have to use that data pipeline to do that. There are a lot of solutions that you're going to just do that within the notebook itself. So it could be that I've got an API that I need to go hit, or I want to connect to my Azure SQL database that's out there. You can do all that from a notebook within Fabric today. Like in this example, you're seeing where we're bringing in data from a Parquet file. That Parquet file could be sitting out in ADLS. That could be a file that is shortcutted into our Lakehouse, which is kind of what you're seeing here with that being under the files folder. What we're doing though is we're bringing that data into what we call a data frame within PySpark, which really all that is an in-memory table. It has a name, which we're calling DF for short. Ideally, we would call it something a little bit more descriptive, like it's a data frame around X, a data frame around cars, data frame around coffee shops, whatever it may be. That way we know what it is as we iterate through this. But that table, in-memory table, if you will, has rows, it has columns. We can partition our data. So we can create a partition structure within this and then go write that in a partition format in Delta. We can schedule these notebooks and run those either from a pipeline or another activity type. We can manage our dependencies, and there are things that we're not going to talk about too in depth here, but there are other items like environments that you can deploy out into your Fabric workspace that your notebooks would then be tied to. So there's a drop down in the notebook that allows you to select whatever environment that you want to go to. And in that environment, we can set settings on our Spark pool, but we can also pre-install libraries on that. So that way this notebook always has this version of a library like pandas or matplotlib to be able to centrally manage those dependencies. We can then implement error handling and monitoring. Error handling being similar to what you would do in any other scripting language where we have try catch blocks. And if an event occurs, what do we want to do about that? Do we want to trigger a function that then sends out an email? It triggers another notebook to go do something, whatever it may be. And then there is a monitoring pane, just like what Sue talked about a little bit earlier around monitoring the run of a pipeline. We can go in and we can see the history of the run of this notebook just within the notebook pane, or we can step out and go to the Fabric Monitoring Hub, which will allow you to look at all of the workloads that are running in your environment that you have access to then dig in deeper and see what may be going on. You can trigger notebooks in various ways. We can run it within the notebook window itself. We can run it as a pipeline activity, or then we can schedule it like you would a data pipeline. We've seen a couple of examples of this, but we can run a notebook from a pipeline, which is just kind of a powerful way to orchestrate your whole end-to-end solution. And so ideally you're using the pipeline as more of an orchestration engine within here, but you're lacing it up with some other workflows that may be best served for whatever use case that you have. I've told teams for years there's a reason they make different sizes of hammers. You never want to go hit a nail with a sledgehammer. It's never going to end well. Same thing here. Don't go and use a notebook and a huge Spark implementation for a small data set that you need to just go pull. Leverage one of the other workloads within Fabric to be able to go do that and spend a lot of effort in the areas that you need to. And there are things that you're going to want to look into and dig into and figure out what is going to have the best kind of cost versus reward, whatever around that workload to ease the burden on that CU capacity. All right, I think we're getting close. So I'm going to hand this over to Sue to just talk a little bit about practical tips so you can hopefully go and take your DP-700 after this.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Josh. So what we're going to go through now is we're going to go through a little bit of exam preparation for you to enable you to get started with your DP-700. So we'll talk about some of our hands-on practice, study guides, practice tests, the Learn course, and some sample projects. So hands-on practice, you cannot get away from actually getting stuck in, setting up a Fabric trial environment that you can use and you can practice. And my suggestion would be that you choose something that you're passionate about. So I'm an avid runner. So for me, I tend to use my running data whenever I'm going to try something, if I want to do some forecasting or use notebooks to try and look at something, I've usually got a question that I want to ask. So practice and play with it and have a questioning mind. There are many different study guides and resources out there. And I must say the Microsoft Learn course is brilliant. It's a really nice structured way that you can work through each particular area, because even if you look at Josh and I today, we were covering this this course, but there are areas within this course that we have different strengths in, and you can't be expected to know everything, but you do need to have an understanding of what the purpose of everything is. So this is where the Microsoft Learn course is great, because there might be things that you know inside and out because that's what you work with, but there might be other areas that you don't know about but actually could be quite useful. So what I would do is I suggest you work through the Learn course. You read everything, but they also give you instructions that you can use and exercises that you can carry out. Obviously do their exercises, but you get the chance to bring in sample data, you can bring in your own data, and you can experiment and play. And it's by playing is the way that we learn. So there are practice tests as well, and lots of study guides and resources, and just reach out and ask people. There'll be lots and lots of resources. So I found it particularly useful because there were certain areas I hadn't touched on, but understanding what they are and how they work makes me a better person for working, because I have more of an insight. What about you, Josh? Any tips that you've got?
Mainly what you hit. I love the MS Learn environment, the Microsoft Learn environment. That's where I typically will stick within any type of certification path that I'm going to take. You know, there's a practice exam that you can take around the certification path that you're working in. So typically I will go through the learning pathway around that topic, and then I'll take the practice exam a couple times, and then when I feel confident about it, then I will go and schedule the exam and take it. You know, my advice always is to go through the pathway and schedule that certification as quick as possible.
Yeah.
Because it is a vast product. You know, there is a lot to cover within any of these exams, and so you know, being able to take that test when it's fresh is going to be critical.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree. So I hope you've enjoyed the session. We're just going to run through the finishing slides now, and then we'll move on to questions. So just to iterate, what you've sat through today is we've looked at ingesting and managing data in Fabric with Data Factory and notebooks. Next Tuesday, you've got implementing real-time intelligence, which is going to be brilliant. And then we have data warehousing. And even though I've passed the DP-700, I'm still going to join because you can always learn. And then we have the Fabric environment, CI/CD, monitoring and security. And then we have administration and governance. So that gives you, between the 6 sessions, that gives you a really good understanding of the different modules within the DP-700. And then you've got 2 days of exam prep and question and answers, which I hope will help you get ready for the next episode for sitting your DP-700. Final shout out for Vegas. I'm not going. A bit disappointed and very jealous of these guys that are going, but I think it'll be amazing. I went to Stockholm late last year, and thoroughly enjoyed the experience. So enjoy Vegas, and if you register now, then you get the chance to have $150 off your ticket and have lots of fun. And then we have final reminder: if you want to set your DP-700, you get this 50% discount. It is a limited time offer and it will end at the end of March, but it's worth applying for it now, because even if you apply for it now, you don't have to set your date until you're ready. So I definitely recommend applying for it. It takes a couple of days, but there is a limited time offer while supplies last. So, you know, why not save yourself some money? So our final slide. Any questions for Josh and I? And we hope that you've enjoyed the session. So we have questions. Oh, first question, shall I read them out? I'll do the first one. So we have a scenario where Excel files will live in a central site like SharePoint in a folder structure. Looking for approaches with low maintenance, users will upload Excel files every month that need to be appended to the Excel file for what are the storage options in Fabric. So Excel, I think that's a great one for a lakehouse, really. You could use a data flow to pull it in from SharePoint, have a notebook to schedule it on the days that you want to schedule it, and send the data destination to your lakehouse. then when it's in your lakehouse, it can feed your Power BI reports or whichever particular resource that you're using to feed it. I'll let you take the next one, container and blob, for you, Josh.
Thank you. Yeah, so our question is, let's say we have a container and blob storage shortcutted. Is there any way we can apply data integrity tests, check for duplicates? Yeah, so what I would typically do is I would, now that is shortcutted within our lakehouse, I would then use a notebook in PySpark to be able to bring that data in. So we kind of saw that before, where we were bringing this sample data.parquet file into a data frame. Similar, you would do that with whatever that file type is within that blob storage. And then I would go run some data quality analysis against that, whether it's, let me go get a unique count of every single record. Let me see, am I missing values? And then you could go do something with that. You could just mark the record as complete. That way you indicate that it's already been validated, because you don't really need to bring that into Fabric to do some level of analysis. Or I would just move that through that medallion architecture and write it to our warehouse for long-term analysis. And there are some really cool functions within PySpark. There's specifically a function called drop duplicates. So I can bring that into a data frame and then just call that function the dropping duplicates within it. So it's really cool.
And even if you don't know that, you can go into Data Wrangler. So once you've used Spark to pull the data frame into your notebook, once you have a data frame in your notebook, there's a tool called Data Wrangler. And Data Wrangler will basically, it takes you through the most common data cleansing steps that you would use. So you don't have to necessarily know what drop .NA is, but you can actually say drop duplicates, and it'll write the code for you, and then you can paste it into your notebook for you. So it does it, but you also learn by doing that to understand what you can do within PySpark or Python. So next question, how can I completely disconnect all Spark jobs in a notebook? Just press stop. But I don't know if I'm, it will only run if you tell it to run. If you don't want it to run, then you would press stop to stop that notebook being activated.
Yeah, you can stop the session, or you can go into the monitoring hub and verify that it is truly stopped, and you can even stop it from the monitoring hub itself.
Question, what questions most surprised you when you did the DP-700 exam? I was trying to think. I don't think any of them surprised me really, because I'd read through them. I think I probably was surprised a little bit about how much coding knowledge you need to have, because you need to understand KQL, you need to understand SQL, and you need to understand PySpark. But what I would say is quite a lot of it is understanding the flow and nature of data, because we were talking about this earlier, funny enough, because you can then rule out which ones it wouldn't be. You say, well, I wouldn't use that because of this, and I wouldn't use that, which then helps you. So I don't think I was surprised, but there's no getting away from it. It's a tough exam. And you do need to know your stuff. So you need to study and practice. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, same. As go through the MS Learn material, do the practice exam. It'll prepare you for it, and be confident, be comfortable with it before you take the actual certification. And if you fail it, you fail it. It's a learning scenario for you, and you'll know where, because of the output of the exam results, where you need to focus on the next time. It could be that your gap is in real-time intelligence technologies. So to finish up with our last question, the question is, in general, if you would like to specialize in data engineering and Fabric, would you recommend learning Python more in depth? You want to start that one, Sue?
Yeah, I would, for me personally, data engineering in Fabric, I think you need to understand modeling. You need to understand the theoretical concepts of what you're trying to do with the data, and how you pull it together, and your dimensional modeling, and your star schemas, yes, understanding Fabric is fabulous, Python is fabulous and lovely, but you need to understand what you want to do with it. So I would say, and knowledge of SQL and how data moves is more important. What would you think, Josh?
Same. Yeah. A lot of the projects that I work, some of them are heavy PySpark, where the majority of the code is written in that. And then there are some projects that I've done that only 10 to 20% is in PySpark. The rest of it is in Spark SQL. So I wouldn't be so worried about knowing PySpark or Python in an advanced level before you jump in. You're going to always learn more. Most humans will learn more by doing. And there are resources out there around learning PySpark, LLM or not LLMs, learning environments or whatever it may be around this, the MS Learn area, things like that, to kind of pick it up and work on it.
Okay. So we're finishing for now, but we'd like to thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. But you can continue the conversation. If you'll see the second link, it's aka.ms/forum/DP-700, and there'll be people that are there to answer more questions and to continue the conversation with you. But thank you so much.